This is probably a weird way to start a reading wrap up, but I just wanted to show you that it was rainy and gloomy outside. So I thought it was a perfect time to do our September reading wrap up because what better time to talk about books, especially in the fall when it's rainy and gloomy outside. Hi guys, it's Amy and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Again, I am doing my September reading wrap up in this video, and if you've been around, you know I'm doing my intros a little bit differently, but let me know in the comments what you think of them. But I'm just trying to bring people in and automatically tell them what's going on. So just trying something different, but I really am excited to talk about the books that I read this month. There has been one in particular that I've been trying to read that I didn't finish, but I'll get into that in a minute. But again, let me know how you're doing and let me know what your favorite read of September was. So I have been trying to finish one book in particular, and that is Labyrinth's Heart by M.A. Carrick. This is the third and final book of the Rook and Rose trilogy. Yeah, I have been struggling with it because I kind of put off reading this, unfortunately, and I've been struggling with like remembering details, and so I've been having to go back and read up on things to remember what's going on, and so it's just taken me more time. And I tried listening to the audiobook for this, but it is so complex, especially being the third and final book. We just have a lot of characters and complex politics, and it's just difficult for me to listen to those kind of books because it's like, I don't know, something about it not being physically in front of me is just more difficult for me to understand. I'm like a little over a third through this book, and it is a chunky one. That doesn't necessarily intimidate me. I really enjoy these, getting into just kind of this dense world, but yeah, I've just really been struggling with this one, so hopefully we'll finish it in October. But the other books that I read this month were really good. I have a lot of like fall or autumnal kind of themed reads. I had some witchy horror. I had a cozy graphic novel. Let me see what else I had. A classic gothic story, some really good cozy mysteries. And then I had some like witchy rom-coms and like fantasy romance vibes. So definitely some really great books for the Burr months or fall autumnal vibes. So hopefully you get something from this, and definitely let me know if you've read any of these. First up is The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and I really like this author's books for the fall months, and this one was no exception. This is their latest release, and it is a very like witchy horror kind of book. It's not like extreme horror or anything like that. I am not a huge horror person. This definitely had like kind of gothic vibes. There's witchcraft. There is a little bit of body horror, but it is definitely more like suspenseful in that there's just like this growing dread as you continue with the book. But this is basically three different women's stories, different POVs in three different timelines, and they all kind of intersect and intertwine. And it is just really fascinating, like seeing how witchcraft has affected these different women. And this is definitely like an evil witch story. This isn't like, oh, the witches are good or whatever. It's like using witchcraft for evil. This was just such a like suspenseful and haunting kind of book. You didn't know what was going to happen next, so it definitely kept you on the edge of your seat. The three different timelines were just really interesting because each one kind of was connected to the other in some way or form, and you just see it become more and more connected as the story goes on. And this being this like classic evil witch story, it was just this like growing tension of like, okay, I know that something bad is going to happen and I'm slowly like driving towards it, but I'm like having to like not look away. So you're just trying to like solve the mystery as the story goes along. Who is doing what? Why are they doing what they're doing? And what's going to happen to the characters? There are some trigger warnings for this book, so I definitely want to make you aware of those. I will put those on the screen for you. There are intense moments with this, but if you can handle those things, I definitely would recommend. It just is a really like thrilling book that just has this growing dread and you don't know what's going to happen. So if you like something that has that suspense to it with some witchcraft, You definitely are going to like this. And I rated this book 3.5 stars. My next read was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And this is a classic gothic tale, and I really have wanted to get more classic stories this year. I haven't really done a very good job of it, but I'm planning this fall to get more of those in. So this was kind of my start of that. And this just had a fascinating story. It's a pretty short read, so it's not anything like too intense, but the writing, the time period that it came from, it definitely has like a density to it. And there were maybe references that I didn't fully understand, but it was just such this like delicious book that has these like fantastic gothic vibes. But it is about a young man named Dorian who kind of becomes obsessed with youth and staying young and getting the most out of life and basically living for pleasure. And the portrait of himself that a painter did that he kind of becomes obsessed with. I really enjoyed the themes that were explored in this book, especially of like vanity and corruption and definitely like hedonism. It's like just living life for pleasure and not caring about the consequences, but eventually those consequences may come and find you. And it was just a really interesting character study with Dorian and even with some of the side characters, but definitely the focus is on Dorian and how like he kind of like accepts like bad influences, but it's also like the corruption of his own heart and not being willing to make positive changes, but just like fully embracing his own vanity and selfishness, and just seeing how that affects his life, affects his relationships with people, his perspective of himself, and just like the dark path that he goes on. And I definitely liked the references that were made in this story. This is definitely a story that has been explored throughout history. It makes references to like Greek mythology with like Narcissus. It definitely had like elements of like Shakespeare with like Hamlet, and even like there was references to some like French like decadent literature like Baudelaire. I'm not a French literature expert or an expert in any of the other things I've listed. Those references were there, and it was definitely interesting just having like that historical aspect to it. As far as classics go, I don't think this was my favorite necessarily, but I still really enjoyed it. It just has this like dark, macabre sort of feel to it. It still has really beautiful writing, like Wilde's writing just has this kind of lyrical feel to it, but he also creates this like foreboding, again, just really interesting character studies. So I am really glad that I read it. I'm glad that I can kind of check it off of my classic list now. And I rated this 4 stars. Now for something totally different, I needed kind of a pick-me-up after reading The Picture of Dorian Gray, but that is Garlic and the Witch by Bree Paulson. This is such a sweet and cute graphic novel with really like heartwarming messages. It has beautiful illustrations, but this is centered around garlic and her sentient vegetable friends and the witch that brought them to life. And this definitely is a story about like big life changes. She is basically discovering her magical abilities, and she is kind of navigating life and some of the big changes that are coming her way. This is a second book, a sequel to Garlic and the Vampire. I would recommend reading the first graphic novel just because there are characters and some details that carry over, but you could read Garlic and the Witch as a standalone, but just know that it will give away details for Garlic and the Vampire. Graphic novels are short and cute reads, so I think it is worth reading them, and they're both perfect for this time of year, and they both have a very similar vibe. Really heartwarming and just adorable, cute, cozy. They have great kind of fall like color schemes and illustrations. But I really enjoyed this. It was definitely a great palate cleanser after The Picture of Dorian Gray. And I think a lot of ages can read this as well. It just has really like a heartwarming message, and I think anyone can relate to it. I'm 34 years old and I still enjoy a cute, cozy graphic novel, even if this is like middle grade. It was just such a cute and fun time, and it was definitely tugging on the heartstrings at the end, so just know that that's in there. But I really enjoyed this one and I rated this 4 stars. My next read was Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. And I've read a few of Kingfisher's books. She's not necessarily like a favorite author of mine, but I go back to her because I know what I'm going to be getting with her books, even though she does like write across genres. But I just find her books to have this really cool vibe to them. They're really like quirky, kind of deadpan humor. They can be kind of like creepy and a little bit foreboding, especially her horror books. But this is more of like a fantasy romance book, and it definitely is more like cozy, I think, in vibes, though it does have some elements of death and body horror and things like that. But at its core, it is more of a cozy fantasy romance. So this is about a paladin named Stephen, which I thought was an interesting name choice. But he has kind of like a broken spirit because his god that he worships and his fellow paladins and community worships has died. They didn't know a god could die, but this god dies. And I'm not giving anything away. This is like in the synopsis for the book. This is about kind of his journey, kind of navigating life after his god dies, and how he gets mixed up with a female perfumer and the kind of murder mystery that they end up going on. This really did have a cute and funny romance. There definitely is some spice in here and some more like innuendo humor. It's more of like the unfiltered thoughts of the characters and them being like, oh, I am attracted to this person. Why am I thinking these thoughts? Like, when you're attracted to somebody and all of a sudden, like, you're thinking things that you would not have thought about anybody else. And it's humorous, but there is definitely like kind of an innuendo sort of vibe to it. But I wasn't really expecting much spice or anything of that nature from Kingfisher. That definitely is in this book, so just be aware of that. This is definitely like an adult fantasy romance. I still feel like the characters had like this genuine and sweet connection. They definitely were like a little bit awkward with each other, and I just really enjoyed like their connection and the way that they get to know each other, even though some of it is through like kind of harrowing experiences, but it was still really sweet and genuine. And it was just like this sweet woman who's like a perfumer, but she definitely is like headstrong, but she also gets like really nervous in front of people. She was a very interesting character, and so was our paladin. And I don't know, there was just something about the way the characters were fleshed out that made them feel unique and interesting, and I feel like just made their connection feel more genuine because you got to see a more kind of like in-depth of the characters. It wasn't just like some fantasy romances, like there just really isn't much personality or kind of like fleshed out details about the characters. It's just like he's hot, she's hot, or they, them, whatever. They're attracted to each other because each of them is hot, and that's all there is to it. It was definitely not like that. So I'm glad that this wasn't just like your typical fantasy romance in that regard. We have some really great side characters as well. We have kind of an animal companion. We have kind of the quirky, like older roommate slash landlord of the perfumer, and a few other side characters as well that just kind of fill everything out and bring some humor to the story, and definitely kind of a mysterious, interesting aspect that makes you want to continue with this series. This is the first of a series. But I also really enjoyed the mystery that was happening. It's kind of this murder mystery, and they're trying to solve what's going on. Different kind of chaotic things are happening. So it does kind of help push the story along and keep you interested. I wouldn't say is like fast paced. It definitely has a steady pacing to it. We also have like the backstories of the characters that bring some interest. So there's a lot of really good elements in this book. I wouldn't necessarily consider it like a favorite fantasy romance. I could see myself continuing with the series. I'm not sure when I will, but I really enjoyed this. I think it is a really fun time. It was entertaining, and it still kind of has, again, like cozy vibes to it, even with everything going on. So if you're wanting something that has some well-rounded characters in a fantasy romance, I would definitely recommend this. My next read was a sequel, and that is When the Crows Away by Aura Lee Wallace. This is the sequel to In the Company of Witches, which I read in the month of August. And this is a cozy mystery series that has witches and a really cozy inn and small town vibes. And I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first one, but I still had a really good time with it. So if you aren't aware of this series, this is about a witch who lives with her aunts and her uncle, who are all witches, and they run this like really cozy inn in this like small New England town. And the kind of murder mysteries that are happening around them and how they try to help solve things. And our main character may or may not be able to speak with ghosts, which definitely brings a really interesting element to the murder mystery. But I really like these because I feel like most cozy mysteries, like the characters aren't really that well fleshed out, but in this series, they definitely are. And especially our main character, but it just has this really like cozy vibe to it. There's some humor in there, but it still has a lot of heart as well. Our main character has gone through some intense things through her life, and there definitely is like a heartfelt connection that you feel with the main character, as well as the side characters. It just really has like this great small town, and even the side characters that are part of the murder mystery and everything I feel like are well fleshed out. It just doesn't feel like the typical cozy mysteries that I've read in the past that just feel a little bit shallow and more cheesy. This does have a little bit of a cheese factor to it, but definitely not like some of the other cozy mysteries I've read. So if you like the idea of a cozy mystery with witchy vibes, I would definitely recommend this. And I rated this 3 stars. My next book is another T. Kingfisher, and that is What Moves the Dead. I was really excited when I found out this kind of gothic horror novella is a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher. I love his kind of dark gothic short stories, especially Fall of the House of Usher. And so if you like the idea of a retelling, I definitely think this is going to be for you. This definitely had some interesting elements to it. It definitely was a fresh take on the story, and I really liked the queer representation that we had in here as well. But if you don't like the idea of like creepy fungi, if like mushrooms in a horror setting might creep you out, I don't know if this would be for you. If you're not familiar with the classic story, it is about a person whose like long lost kind of family friends write a letter to them, and they're saying that they're sick and want them to come and visit. This is happening in both stories, the original and this retelling. But they go and visit their kind of family friends, and they live in this really like creepy old kind of gothic looking manor that's kind of run down, and things are kind of just unhinged, and it just becomes more so as the story progresses. This was definitely very atmospheric. Like you definitely felt like you were in this like dark gothic manor, and just the way that things were described, I feel like Kingfisher did a really good job of. The descriptions of the people and their kind of creepy appearances, to the like wear and tear of the house, even like the land that was around the house. That was definitely an interesting part of the story and a bigger part of this retelling. The weird like animals and the land that was around the house and what was happening with them. So there's definitely like this whole like area, the house has something going on with it that's affecting the people that live in it. And it is just like this great like creepy vibes, and it builds in suspense as like you turn each corner and something else weird and strange is happening. And I just loved that about this retelling, which I felt like really held true to the vibe of the original story. I personally have gone through living in a house that was mold infected. It was definitely a difficult thing to go through and experience. If you've ever like been in that sort of situation, know that this possibly could be triggering for you. There were some moments where I was like uncomfortable just because I had personally experienced some of that, but I was still able to read it. So this definitely is more like fantastical, but I feel like if you maybe have experienced that, you could find it relatable, but also possibly triggering at the same time. So just be aware of that. I know that might sound strange, but if you have gone through something like that, you will understand what I'm talking about, because it can affect your health, and it's kind of a scary situation. So just be aware of those things. I try to make people aware of possible triggers in books. And of course, this being a horror, it's taking it to, again, this fantastical sort of place. But I just really found this like entertaining. I actually started the sequel to this book, but I DNF'd it. I just wasn't really getting into it. It had the same main character and some of the side characters. We were in a different environment and everything, but I might come back to it later. I just wasn't feeling it at the time. So I definitely enjoyed the first book. I can't say anything about the second book yet, but if you like the idea of like a gothic retelling, if you like Edgar Allan Poe's stories, if you like this sort of gothic macabre sort of thing, if you like the idea of creepy fungi and mushrooms, this definitely is going to be for you. I rated this 3.5 stars, and again, would recommend just for a creepy, fun time. After reading that horror story, I needed a little bit of a different vibe, so I went for a witchy rom-com, and first up is Hex Appeal by Kate Johnson. This is the first of a trilogy, and it is this witchy rom-com that has adventure and danger, but also humor and romance in it, of course. It definitely reminded me of the show Charmed from like the 90s and 2000s. I think they like did like a reboot of it. I am not really familiar with the reboot, but I'm talking about the original series. And I really enjoyed that show. It was like three witchy sisters kind of fighting evil with witchcraft. And that definitely was the vibe of this book. We are following one particular witch who lives with some other witches in this magical kind of chaotic house. And they live in the small town of Essex in England. This house is basically like hidden and magically protected, but we have the landlord who owns the property, who basically inherited the property. You'll see more of that in the story, but he is trying to find the house, and it just brings this kind of unhinged, full of shenanigans story. I really loved the whimsical feel of this, and definitely loved the more historical elements that were brought to it. We kind of have like some witch hunting and kind of getting into the history of that. But it still is like fun and adventure filled. We're fighting evil. And there is, of course, romance with this. This definitely feels like witchy rom-com. And there are some outlandish things that happen with the romance. It feels a little bit insta-love, but it's not awful. But it does have some kind of outlandish things as far as like magic and spice are concerned. So just know that it was more like humorous than anything. It was definitely like unserious. It was just kind of outlandish and funny, but just know that that kind of content is in there. I had been looking for a book that reminded me of the show Charmed, and this definitely delivered. I just really had a fun time with it. It definitely brought all the vibes that I was looking for. So if this sounds up your alley and you like witchy rom-coms, I definitely would recommend reading this. And I rated this 4 stars. I was really surprised, but I had that much of a fun time with it. I also read the sequel Hex in the City, and this still had the great kind of magical, adventurous vibes in a witchy rom-com. But this definitely was a different story. We are in the city of London, and we're following a witch who works at a kind of magic witchy shop with crystals and that sort of vibe. But she kind of gets entangled with this illusionist, and he kind of has like the rock star leather pants, like kind of Chris Angel sort of vibe to him. So it's a little bit silly and cheesy. Some things happen and they kind of get tangled up together in this sort of crazy adventure. And it's also about their attraction to each other. I didn't like this one as much because I felt like it was a bit more focused on like physical attraction than like emotional connection. So just be aware of that. But I still really enjoyed like the magical adventure and kind of mystery unfolding through the story. It definitely has some crazy shenanigans. We have like a cursed crystal. We have like ghosts. There's a lot going on, and it definitely was a fun time, but I just wasn't a fan of kind of the connection between the two characters. And even though, like, as the story unfolds, like, you get to know the characters more, there is more, like, substance to them as the story goes on. But I just feel like that wasn't the main connection that the characters had. I just feel like it didn't have quite as, like, cozy and nostalgic of a feeling as the first book, so it was a little bit of a letdown. I do want to read the third book, which I believe is called Hex and Sensibility or something like that. It is called Hex and Hexability, so it kind of has like a Jane Austen Regency romance sort of vibe to it, so I definitely want to give that one a try. Hex in the City I think was a fun time. It just wasn't as good, I think, as Hex Appeal. I rated this 3 stars, but if any of what I described sounds good to you, I would recommend. All right, guys, those are all of the books that I read in the month of September. I hope that you enjoyed this video and hopefully you got something from this as far as recommendations. And I definitely want to know if you've read any of these, what you thought of them, whether you like them or you didn't. I love chatting about these books with you guys in the comments. And I definitely want to know what your favorite read of September was. I think the highlights for me was just being able to get to a point where I was enjoying the book with Labyrinth's Heart, but I definitely enjoyed the Bewitching, I really enjoyed the Picture of Dorian Gray, and I really enjoyed Hex Appeal. So those were kind of the highlights for me this month. And as always, I ask you to leave an emoji if you got to the end of this video, which I really appreciate you watching all the way to the end. Leave me just some kind of fall emoji, maybe like a pumpkin or a fall leaf or something like that, just so that I know that you got through the video and that you enjoyed it. I'm really excited about some of the content that I'm going to bring to you in October. I'm thinking of maybe like kind of a fall vlog sort of vibe, like getting the most out of the fall season. So we'll see how that goes. Again, thank you for watching and I will see you guys soon. Bye!